thought he showed up to like all the meetings and really.
Maybe it's if
trying to.
iteration.
I don't know how successful that was, but.
I think that would be helpful also when we go to present the budget, because then they're more aware as we go along, and they're more informed,
Yep.
and they can make a.
But in lack of
better
getting the
judgment.
city representative here, if we project years down the road and we can give them some type of projection, like right, say in December 1st, we give them a 3-year projection.
Right.
They're not going to sleep for a couple of weeks, but at least they'll know what the direction's going to be.
And to expand on that idea, and I mean, do you want to consider, you can put it, I've heard a number of city council people come down, I'm sure they come to you all the time, like, oh, they're shocked, they've never heard any of this information, all of a sudden we had a vote on this stuff. It's like, really? Really?
Yeah.
You know where we meet, you know, you pretty much.
It's not a secret.
It's not a secret, and you're shocked, really, you didn't know anything about it. So maybe put the ball in the court, see if they want a liaison here as well. You know?
Right.
I mean, just expand that idea.
Last
Good
question.
idea.
Sorry. Last question is, how much dialogue do you have with people at the State Department of Education and their funding mechanism to argue these small points as far as, not talking, I mean, they give us a percentage and I understand that concept, but when you can go in and say, listen, we have a 22% dropout rate over a 3-year period, we've spent, the administration has spent 6 months, did that whole process of evaluation, and we need some money outside of the budget to be funded by the state to just deal with this. It's not going to go into the general budget, it's just going to go into this one aspect which we can articulate as a problem unique to this district. We have a solution, but we can't.
That's called grant writing, and
Okay.
you, believe me, we try for every and any grant that we could get that would support where we would like to get this district to. At the same time, the way it's redesigned with the education reform, in the past it was priority school districts, now it's Alliance school districts.
Focused or turnaround.
Schools. And I'm proud to say that Torrington is doing too well to be in those categories, okay? So, I mean, we're not top performing schools, you know, we're not like Farmington Valley schools who are much wealthier than we are, and yes, having children, you know, having children in poverty does impact greatly, as Mr. Caponero said earlier. But, so we are doing well for the diverse population we are serving. And I don't want to be an Alliance school. I don't want to be one of the district. I don't want to be one of those low performing. Would we get a lot more money? You betcha we would. We'd get a lot more
Exactly
money.
how to spend it?
Right.
They would.
So, you know, when you were asking about, one of the things that Mrs. Creedon and I were talking about is, what are the chances of having a newcomers piece at the high school? Again, these students that are overage and undercredited. You know, how do we move them so that we know they're not going to graduate with their cohort? They're probably going to need an extra year or more, you know? But how do we get them to graduation? So a real good, credible diploma with, you know, rigorous coursework. So, you know, that's something that if that's what she wants to do, and she's developing her budget, she will come and say, okay, this is what I need to do this. We have an ELL program at the high school, but it's not enough given, you know, how many students we have and the kind of coursework they need and the support they need in that coursework.
I just want us to be careful. That's not a 21.4% dropout rate. That's a 21.4% non-graduation rate on time. That doesn't mean that all those kids dropped out. That just means that those kids didn't graduate in 4 years. They may have repeated 10th grade. You know, we had that large population that were 9th grade repeaters a few years ago. That all that this number reflects is that that's the group that made it out in 4 consecutive years. It doesn't mean they dropped out. They could still be here for another reason or continuing in a 5-year program.
But then isn't that extended graduation?
The extended graduation
So
rate
now,
reflects that.
so you're still talking of 15%?
Yeah.
14%.
Which,
14, okay, 14.
I'm just saying, we've always hovered in that
Yeah.
14 to 17% range. To say it's a 22% dropout rate is unfair to the way the number is being presented. Because again, it's statistics. You only get out of it depending on what they were trying to achieve when they made the numbers. Okay. Last links.
I'll continue with that because that's another testing point. I don't have slides for this, but you can refer to the information in your packet. The last links is an assessment that's given to English language learners to determine their proficiency level in English language and usage.
All of them K through 12.
And so if you look at the information that's included in your packet, there is a mysterious acronym at the top, the AMAO, and that stands for Annual Measurable Achievement Objective. So the state sets targets for how much progress they expect our English language learners to make over the course of a year. And you can see the 3 bullets that are on that cover page. They have to make progress in acquiring English language proficiency as measured by that test. And I believe there are 5 levels of proficiency on that test that are used to benchmark the students.
Speaking, listening, reading, writing, and comprehension.
In addition to that, there is a threshold for students who must attain language proficiency. So they've scored at levels 4 or 5 on that test, which demonstrates that they are proficient speakers of English. And then the third item is that they have to achieve adequate yearly progress measured by their performance on the state's assessments. And a lot of times that's the really tough one because our students are able to acquire their spoken language much more quickly than their academic language. And that shows really a deeper degree of sophistication of their understanding and use of language.
And they may even be able to demonstrate mastery of the English language as measured by this test. But then the application comes when they have to take the CMT.
Right, so in these 3 areas, our students were able to meet the targets in all 3 of those areas. We were one of only 11 districts in the state of Connecticut where the students were able to achieve at better than satisfactory levels on all 3 of those. And you'll notice in the narrative that we scored 88%, which was more than the 78% required in students who showed progress. So 88% showed progress. The benchmark for students who gained proficiency was 28. We had 60% of our students gain proficiency, and as a group, the students met the adequate yearly progress mark. So this is just a very quick piece of good news about a particular group of our students. It shows that in the time that they are members of the Torrington Public Schools, that they're doing their job and we're doing our job to achieve these goals that the state has set for us in English language proficiency.
This was 362 students who took this test who participated in the ELL program in town. And that includes kindergarten.
Now, will this change at all the way it's structured with the waiver of the facility?
They haven't told us that yet. I'm sure it will.
We actually piloted a new online version of the
Yes.
Last Links this year. That was the new wrinkle to it, and seemed to do very well.
But this is unheard of, okay, for second language learners in a district to make all 3. We've always done well with the first 2, always, for years. We've been recognized from the state for doing well in the top 2, but to hit all 3. Tomorrow we're having a meeting of the ELL department, and we're going to do a little celebration, I think.
Congratulations.
I will.
Okay. Alternative energy. You gotta give Sue a break, Dave. You gotta come give her a little middle inning relief.
Short short break. No pictures, no pictures. Not a lot more to report than last time I was here. Chiller project and lighting project at the Torrington Middle School is going as planned. The lighting piece is complete. The piping for the chillers is about 80% done. They're putting the primary pumps on now and controls for the electric, and hopefully we may get a test fire up before October 1st on that. So we're really pushing to try to get it working. One of the things that I will talk about on energy is the district's biggest energy issue right now is the electric contract for generated electricity that will run out, or as they like to say, sundown, this December 2012. We currently are on target with about 3 suppliers. We're receiving numbers, and each one of them are going to be, the bids that will be brought forward are going to be for 1-, 2-, and 3-year contracts. So we're going to structure the contract a little bit differently so it's advantageous to us this time, allowing us to search in other areas for different energy solutions, whether it be solar, fuel cell, wind, however we want to go. We won't be penalized by how much electricity we have on the contract and how much we can get off the grid. So we're looking a little bit out of the box and a little bit ahead there. Right now, as the grid numbers stand as far as what we're paying in kilowatt hours and what the real numbers are out there right now, the district stands to gain about almost $150,000 annually if we can close this contract on some good numbers. We'll have about 2 weeks before the final numbers come in. We're looking at standalone projects or standalone contracts for us only. We're also looking at consortium contracts. Once again, the 1-, 2-, and 3-year intervals on these contracts is going to tell us which way we're going to go. At that point, the superintendent, the business manager, will be aware of what the numbers are. They can bring it to budget committee, and then the contracts can be structured for board approval from that point. But that's paramount for us right now as far as the energy supply contract, because without that, we're going to be under the gun for CL&P, and their rates are 25% higher than the bid numbers that we're looking at. So you're not going to save any money by going and falling back to CL&P on this. We really need to go to the outside supplier, and I hope to have these numbers once again in about 2 weeks for everyone's review, and then bring it to the board for a final. Some of the other things that we are working on is a roof and solar integration model at Forbes School. Working out preliminary numbers right there right now. Everyone is very intuitive towards that solar piece there. Done a lot of research on it. I don't have anything that I want to present as of yet, but we're looking at better than a 5- to 6-year payback on this particular issue for the board. So once we get a possible PV system in place, it will pay for itself within about 5 years. That's the goal that I'm trying to achieve as far as before I bring any numbers to the board here. Some of the other stuff we're looking at is also fuel cell possibilities. Those are being investigated. They have a lot of positive things. There's a 24-hour demand capability. They have heat conversion, 100% electric transfer, off the grid and stuff like that. They've got the LREC program going. Some of the negatives are how big the cost is to get them in place, the maintenance agreements that need to go with them, and what kind of maintenance are involved in keeping these things running. I don't have a definite number on that. It looks like a 7 to 8 year payback on that, unless we can find some other kind of funding for those. Problem is, you can't stand that alone and bring it to the state and ask for some kind of a reimbursement or something. They won't allow that. You've got to incorporate that into a renovation project or a school improvement project of some sort, where you can, bring the two pieces together, where we can go in front of the Department of Education facility unit and see if we can get a reimbursement rate. So I'm looking, we're still, these are in process, working on these types of items. We're also looking at wind. That's a tough one to try to integrate into getting some kind of money back for that. Once again, that's a standalone project to put a wind turbine up. Going to cost us over $1 million to do that. And the payback right now, I can't generate a number that's better than 11 to 12 years right now. So that may not be the best way to go. Another item that we're looking at is a draft energy audit here at the high school. We're looking at, very similar to what we did at the middle school, we're looking at lighting. We're looking at VFD add-ons for our major players, like the fans that are in the gymnasium, for instance, and some of the other rooftop units that are here, putting them on a VFD so we can, monitor and modulate how much energy we're using there in the lighting. Those numbers preliminary are looking very good. That could be a 3 to 4 year payback on those. So that's from a CL&P incentive. So just to let you know that these are some of the things we are working on. I think it all kind of goes in line to what the chairman talked about. You're looking at a 3-year budget. These kind of things are how we're going to be able to lower our costs and go forward with the district, so we can add on those great things like curriculum and stuff that's going to need more teachers and stuff. The only way we're going to do that is by really taking a serious look at what we're working on now. So that's my report. Okay. Take a few questions, not too many. I don't want to give out too many answers.
Did anybody do geothermal out here?
I have not looked into geothermal yet. No, I don't know if one of the things about a geothermal also is that could go into the fuel cell, because a fuel cell will allow you to work off water temperatures that are 200 degrees, and possibly those waters generated through the heating system, you can literally cut your gas consumption down by heating the building with that with that byproduct of the fuel cell. So in answering your question, no, I have not looked at geothermal, but it is part of that process in the fuel cell capability.
Yeah, the only reason I ask is my brother does a lot of large scale, works with a lot of municipalities out west, and he told me this about a year ago. He just said, one of the recurring conversations they have out there is why New England doesn't do more of it, so apparently there's very little being done out here, but apparently people who know say that this is potentially very usable technology for here. So just throwing it out there, seeing if I can get a name. Would you like a name? Or can you just think something?
Yeah, we could do something like that.
It's got a lot to do with our soil type, our water table.
It's very specific to the.
You have to be able to you have to be able to disperse the heat, and you have to be able to absorb the heat, depending on which season you're in.
Yeah.
Sands are very good at transferring, clays are not. So with our glacial till that we have in New England, it's hit and miss. You got to be in the right mix. I mean, there's a lot of places you can get out into Arizona and you can put in approximately 200 feet of well, whereas a house in New Hampshire, I was at a conference on it. The house in New Hampshire required 900 feet of well versus 200 feet of well in Arizona, and it's based on the soil content. You know, the heat's the same at 55 feet. At 5 feet, the heat's the same there or here. It's just a matter of how you get the transfer of energy.
Yeah, so with that being said, is it just not even worth pursuing? I mean,
In the city, in New York City, they're doing a tremendous amount of it because of the tight spaces. They're doing vertical geothermals. A lot of the big electrical and telephone vaults in the middle of the streets, they can't put an air conditioning unit on it because it's in the middle of Broadway and 7. So they go down and they're actually building heat transfer systems deep down into the bedrock. It is growing in New England. It's just, you know, everybody automatically goes to the horizontal geothermal systems. And around, well, it's laying trenches 7-8 feet deep throughout your property to do the heat transfer. What I've seen in New York State, what they're getting more use out of is vertical. You know, instead of just drilling down, because we do water wells around here, 900, 1,100 feet is not unusual. You know, the rest of the country, they go down like 200 feet and they're happy. So, but you know. Yeah, I know where you live. You know, we can end up, you know, with an 1,100 foot well and hydrofracking to try to get enough water to flush a toilet. You know, out there they get that kind of water at 30 feet. So, you know, it's a matter of heat transfer, but it is growing. It's definitely taken off slowly. New England doesn't jump into anything, you know that.
Yeah.
If we didn't invent it, it's going to be a slow road.
Is it better for new construction? Just a quick question. I have a question for that then. Is it better for a new construction type of a thing, or you know, rather than trying to put trenches under this building or drill underneath it? I would think if you're going to build a newer project, that would be the time to do that.
Well, you have the benefit of the fields.
Yeah.
To do your heat transfer. Most commercial properties don't have that kind of acreage, so they're trying to do it under parking lots, which is limited.
Right.
It just becomes, it's a space thing. We built too close without the roof. Andrew.
Just to kind of piggyback on what you're presenting tonight and the question that I had, which was raised at the last board meeting, that now there appears to be, it was told to us, I believe, by the state rep, one of them, that if we do a major renovation project, we're looking at 75%, 72%. I don't know what the leadership has been thinking about as far as, obviously, the East School is one project, Michigan Avenue would be another project that, or would be major renovation projects. To tie that together, if we were to do a major renovation project titled to that 72%, would the energy mechanicals that really what we're kind of talking about, would they be a separate item, or would they fall under that 72% cost reimbursement?
I think I believe something like the solar type of a thing, we can incorporate that as a model into the roofing project, for instance. That would be a major renovation. That would be integrated into the same. We should be able to, the cost of the solar, for instance, would be at a 70% or 72% reimbursable rate along with the roof, because they would be incorporated as one project.
So the 72% would, being that it would be just say, forget the other type of structural renovations, just the energy aspect, the cost of installing that, would that be classified as a major renovation? Or is that a separate concept?
Not as a standalone.
Not as
If you were just standalone to take Torrington High School and you said, I'm going to solar Torrington High School, no, that's not a renovation. That's an energy improvement.
Right.
We wouldn't classify that. Dave's alluding to Ford's roof. If we tie Ford's roof in with a solar project, that can be considered a major renovation. If we get East School approved, if we can get that put through to a referendum, you could turn East School into the highest energy efficient building in the state by incorporating all the different technologies into one building, and that would fall under the reimbursement.
Okay, doing it, I was alluding to that before. These standalone projects, the state doesn't even want to look at them, really. They really don't. You know, I've spoken to them, you know, at length for a few times on especially on this fuel cell type stuff and everything. And you really have to piggyback them with other projects. And they don't want to see you know, for instance, even if we wanted to do a fuel cell here at the high school, for instance, they don't want to see us just put a fuel cell in. They want to see us add on to the window walls or something. Make the building a little bit more energy efficient, and add on to that with the fuel cell. Don't just put a fuel cell here and just blow all the energy and all the savings out those front windows, because we're not doing anything there to really help the cause.
I mean, clearly the building that seems to be in the most need would be Midgeon Avenue. That's obviously the most, I would assume, one of the most inefficient energy buildings we have.
But size-wise, it's not the biggest, it's not one of the big
But
users.
the renovation would be a percentage of what you're doing to the actual building.
It's an administration
So-
building, though.
Yeah, it's not a school.
It's not a,
What's that?
You wouldn't get reimbursed.
It's not, that's not a school building.
I mean, it's a school building, but it's not used as a school.
it's not primarily a school.
How many students would have to actually be brought there to actually be considered? I mean,
I don't.
well, you're kind of laughing, but I mean,
No,
I
no,
know
I'm
that we
saying-
have
I
kids
know
there
you're right.
every day being tutored and
Yeah,
stuff, so I
yeah,
mean, just how
good
many
point.
kids?
I know that.
Percentage-wise
That's-
of the space, can you kind of put that together?
Yeah, that's it. Didn't think about the kids that were getting, you could
Well, I mean, it
see what
seems
the number
like
is.
that's the direction we're going. We need that space. It seems like there's a lot of space there that could actually be utilized.
Any other
Never
questions
say
for
never.
Dave?
Never say never.
John, anything for Dave? Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
AP and college credit courses.
Cheryl's asked me to speak to this. At your places, there is some additional information that has been provided at a previous request for information about UConn ECE, AP, and other college credit-bearing courses. There is a lengthy narrative that I've provided that explains some of the points I'm going to make now in more detail. And then there is the raw data. But let me just start out with a couple of framing remarks. In the most direct answer to your question, this is the information about the number of courses that are available. There are courses available at Torrington High School that are designated as UConn ECE, or Early College Experience courses, and Advanced Placement courses. The reason for the double designation is that those UConn courses actually enroll the students as UConn students and award UConn credit. An AP designation exists to prepare the students to take the advanced placement tests that are developed by the Educational Testing Service, ETS. So they're kind of two separate designations, but there are 6 of those courses that serve 108 student records. And by a student record, that just represents a single student in a single course. So when you see these numbers, a lot of times they don't appear to add up, or they seem like they're too big, or they seem like they're too small. What they represent is the fact that you have a single student who is enrolled in that particular course. But that same student may be taking multiple courses. So when it says you have 108 in one and 78 in the other, it may be the same 78 kids, it may be some subset of the 78 kids. It can be a little bit confusing. There are 5 courses at Torrington High School that are UConn Early College Experience courses only. There are 6 that are AP only, so that's a total of 17 courses that have these higher level college credit designations. There are 31 honors courses, and there are 72 college prep courses. So now that's just sort of the raw data that comes from adding up numbers that are on those spreadsheets that were provided in your packet. A couple of points that are explained in the narrative, and I'm sure that there'll be lots of questions about this because it's not an easy process. The student's enrollment in an ECE course or an AP course does not necessarily equal a college credit. Okay, there are students who take an AP course and they may elect not to take the AP exam, or they take the AP exam and they're not successful on it, or they take the AP exam and they score a 3 and then the college of their choice does not recognize that 3 as an adequate level of performance to award either placement or credit. So it does help, it does give you a good chance, but it's not necessarily a one-to-one relationship. If I take this course, I'm going to get a college credit. There are also some pretty significant differences between the ECE courses and the AP courses in a couple of different areas. One is in staff credentials. Those teachers at Torrington High School who teach the UConn ECE classes have to be certified by UConn and have to participate in a training program in order to be authorized and certified to teach the classes for UConn credit. Our teachers who teach AP classes, while they are similarly bright and motivated, usually just attend a summer institute that provides them with the background and the experiences that they feel are necessary for teachers to have the skills to work with advanced placement students. As I mentioned earlier, there's some difference in how credits are awarded. Students may successfully complete a UConn course and have a UConn credit. They go to UConn, they're all set. It really gives them a leg up. If they go to another college, that college may not elect to recognize that credit, or it may count. There are also some differences in curriculum, and it was an interesting conversation that I had this summer with Ms. Creedon about the ways in which the ECE curriculum and the advanced placement curriculum seem to be diverging. UConn seems to want to still continue to have a lot of control over what books are used, what content is covered, and what constitutes an appropriate level of mastery. The AP exam, on the other hand, is under the control and jurisdiction of ETS, the company that develops the AP test. So consequently, they're serving 2 different masters. There may be different content, there may be different materials, there may be different course objectives, and what our teachers have observed lately is that those courses that attempt to be both are requiring them to make a lot of decisions about, do I teach this, do I not teach this, do I include that, do I not include that. UConn might not require it, but it may be necessary for the students for the AP exam. It may not be on the AP exam, but it's something that the UConn faculty determines is important. So, you know, once again, there are some differences. The next paragraph talks about the issue of some of the scheduling conflicts. We have a large number of competing courses and a relatively small number of time slots. I think the administration in constructing the schedule is cognizant of trying to schedule some of the more popular advanced courses to be in different periods. For example, a student who is taking AP Calculus may very well be interested in AP Physics, and so you wouldn't schedule them 4th period. But that same student may also want to take AP French, or AP Latin, or AP Italian. And when you add up all of the choices that we have available between the ECE and the AP classes, there are more of those options that students can elect to take than there are periods where they can be offered separate from one another. So there are times within the schedule where there are multiple advanced classes offered within the same period. That's also complicated by the fact that our staff, according to their contract, teaches for 5 teaching periods. So you may have a teacher who has the certification or the qualification to teach 1 or more of these classes, but because of their teaching contract and the fact that they teach 5 sections, that may also create some limitations. One other issue that I discussed very briefly in there is that currently there are 4 different course levels at Torrington High School: general, college prep, honors, and then the AP college level. These are not completely separate and distinct tracks. You used to hear a lot about tracking in high school, but what they do serve as designations of the rigor that's associated with the courses. There are some general and college prep courses where class membership overlaps a little bit. There are college prep and honors courses where class membership overlaps, and there are honors and AP courses where class membership overlaps. It has been a recommendation of the NEASC Accreditation Committee for the school to consider reducing those number of course levels to at least 3. So combining either 2 of the lower ones two of the middle ones or two of the higher ones, in order to provide more opportunities and equity for students. So there are a lot of issues that are involved. I've tried to explain them in some detail in the narrative. I think if you look at the numbers, you're probably going to come up with quite a few questions. And let me give you an example of one of them if everyone wants to look at the sheet that's entitled College Credit Courses. It has a chart across the top. One question I had when I first looked at the data was that there were 16 students who signed up for UConn Biology AP who did not get UConn Biology AP. Part of the reason for that is that the teacher who was formerly under the employ of the Torrington Public Schools who taught that course retired. And at the time that the course scheduling was done, there wasn't anybody within the school who was certified as a UConn instructor. So if you look at the column all the way to the right-hand side, of those 16 students, it appears from the numbers that 13 of them moved from the UConn ECE biology to an AP biology class. And I can attest to the fact that this summer the district paid for a Torrington High School teacher to attend a workshop to become a certified AP instructor. So 13 of the 16 were able to find a course of similar rigor and perhaps potential to earn college credit and placement. 3 of them may have gone to plant science or sculpture or statistics or signed up for string orchestra because now that request could not be fulfilled. So the same thing is true if you look at the next one, UConn Calculus AP. For whatever reason, there were 5 students who asked for that course who were not placed in that course, but 4 of them ended up, perhaps the same 4 students, it's not clear, but you could, I'm assuming from the numbers, that 4 of them were registered in an honors calculus class. So, I mean, there's a lot of information here. I think each one of them represents probably a fairly unique set of circumstances that may have been impacted by schedule, may have been impacted by staff certifications, and it may have been impacted by student choices. One of the things that surprised and impressed me a little bit was the fact that many of our very popular courses, including just about every single one of our career and technology education electives, philosophy, psychology, sociology, international studies, and plant science, all courses which appear to have a lot of cachet with our students, are college prep designation courses. They are not honors or AP courses. So my conclusion in looking at the information is that I'm sure that we have a lot of students and families who want us to have as many offerings as possible, and some of them may have been disappointed, but given our budgetary resources, our staffing, and the certification issues that are associated with offering the courses, and the extremely wide variety of student interests that we have to fit into a 7-period day with teachers who only teach 5 classes, that I think that we've made a good faith effort to try to offer as diverse a program to students as possible. But each one of these numbers can be drilled down in more detail.
Thank you. I know one of the questions that was asked in this presentation was to see what time of, what period of the day they're offered. Because there have been many complaints that that several of them are offered the same period, and that students were not able to take multiple AP classes because they had to choose between the one and the other. And when we were looking for this information, that was one of the areas we wanted to look at, was to see how they were spread out amongst the 7-period day.
My data assistant was able to pull all of the course information and enrollment information from our Power School program. So we did provide the list of all of the courses. I don't have the scheduling matrix to see which ones were offered in the same period. As I said before, I think an attempt was made to try to offer the obvious combos on different periods, but that wasn't always possible. For example, it's hard to know whether a student who's taking AP Calculus also wants to take French, Spanish, Italian, or Latin, and that may in fact be the same period. But I don't have the scheduling matrix from the high school to share with you tonight. If you'd like that information, we can pull that together.
Any other questions?
Did we not know until the end of the year that the UConn biology certified teacher was retiring? Was it a last minute decision or?
You
No,
would think that would-
we did know, and in fact, we paid for a training for a teacher to take that class, and about 2 weeks before school started, decided to go to another district.
That happened in more than just science, right?
So we paid for them to get the UConn training and then they left?
Yeah,
They did.
yeah. We may want to enter into some sort of a contract with teachers in the future, that if they are going to avail themselves of that training, that they owe us a little bit of time beyond the training. We have not done that, but fool me once.
What is the teacher's contract year? They're contracted from
Teachers-
July 1st to June 30th, right?
Yeah, but unfortunately, they're not, we're not bound to hold them to their contract. This free country, if they decide to move or leave with adequate notice, they're entitled to do so.
So these are unilateral contracts.
Correct.
Fiona was still.
I just have two other, I share Ken's concern, and I would also like to see the number, if it's possible at some point, to get the number of AP students that could not get their course offerings.
That's right in the center where it says UConn ECE AP unfilled course requests.
Not just the UConn, but all the AP courses?
I believe that's all of them. I think that's the way the information is entered in Power School.
That's not all of them.
So you think it was more than 16, 21, 24?
Well, that's for
27,
UConn, I'm talking about all the other AP courses.
30. That's 40 students who had unfilled course requests in those upper levels. Do you think it was more than 48? And many of them were accommodated in other courses.
How many students, I see all of these different AP courses and UConn courses, are they generally filled for 20, 25 kids per class, or do we actually have some of these classes where 2 or 3 students? And, you know, do we have a kind of a policy at the board level or administrative level that if we're gonna have an AP or a UConn class, it has to have a minimum amount of students for us to,
Mr. Chair, could we call on Ms. Creighton to address
We
if there are
most
any
certainly can.
scheduling thresholds? Are there any points at which you decide not to run a course section because teachers can only teach 5 sections?
Generally, we've had discussions with central office administration as to how to go with that. Certainly there's been pressure to run as many of the AP courses as possible, AP UConn courses. To answer your question, Mr. Nargi, we have some of the courses that have in excess of 20 students in a course, and then there's some others that have 10, 11, 12. So,
but no classes less than 10, is what you're saying?
We generally don't like to run less.
right, I believe a couple of the language classes might be smaller than that.
I mean, if you look at the advanced placement enrollment chart that's on the lower left of the page, AP Music Theory, it's unlikely that one teacher is dedicated for an entire teaching period to service only those 2 students who wish to participate in that course content. So they're likely part of another course with an enriched or an enhanced curriculum that allows them to meet the standards for AP Music Theory. Biology probably is a section, chemistry is a section, English language AP is probably 2 sections. The same rationale for the computer science AP exam prep, and AP Latin is probably a section. So I mean, if you're using 20 as sort of a rough benchmark, it's probably not unusual to have a section of AP or an ECE class with 12 students, 12 to 15 students in it, but some of them are very popular. UConn, US History, there are 45 students who are involved in that class, and so I'm not sure whether that's 2 sections or more
That
than
is
2
2
sections.
sections.
So those are 2 large sections.
And
My point
the
is-
language classes, like French 4 and 5,
Right.
are in the same room at the same time. The teacher's teaching both of them at the same time at a different level. So-
I'm just saying, I think at the board level, if we can, we should give some type of guideline for a minimum amount of students. I mean, we just have limited resources and need to have a certain minimum standard requirement of students for us to feel that we should run that class.
There was a question about whether or not some of these advanced level courses could be available through the online learning program. And after consulting with our online learning program manager, they're not really set up for that purpose. There are some, a handful of courses in some of the major areas like US History that provide sort of a general review course, but would probably not have the same intensity and rigor and depth as the student taking that as a face-to-face course here in the district, so.
Well, that was my whole concept, which was, like I say, it should be a minimum for a certain class period to have students. Let's say you had 2 students who were wanting to do Latin AP. You have a Latin teacher, and he would monitor that AP, but the student would still take it online, so that the student would have the opportunity to do it at his discretion, but with the guidance of that Latin teacher who, I don't know if you'd have to compensate him or whatever, but he would teach his classes and then he would still guide that kid through the online learning. That was the concept that I had, and you're saying that the actual online setup does not provide for that type?
It's, at this time, it's pretty limited. I don't think it would be a viable option. I think we would prefer to have a student enrolled in a face-to-face class, even if it were a combined class, such as the one Mr. Chad mentioned earlier, where there were 2 students at one level and 3 students at another level. And even that is difficult in terms of determining what the teaching period is. The teacher's only teaching 5 classes. That counts as, one teaching period, even though there are really different groups of students in the class at the same time.
What would it take to get the online learning mechanism to actually fulfill the type of concept that I'm talking about? I mean, clearly, I just know that there's some students out there that are just so small in quantity that we as a district cannot provide for them. But if we can move in that direction for those students, and we also have the teachers who are certified in that subject matter, I just don't understand why we as a district can't move in that direction.
So that the student get the core work online, but then through the teacher, create a final product that they had to do, or research, or, it would be in addition to what the online course is requiring.
Right. I mean, how far are we from that? Or is it not?
Well, our current board policy triages the access to those seats, and those students are probably in the 3rd or maybe even 4th tier from being able to be guaranteed enough seat time to successfully complete the course.
Just my wish. We have a board.
Yeah, I support that too. How would you want to do that in terms of an agenda item?
I mean, there are additional options that you can pursue.
Well, I'm not, excuse me.
Well, that's
I'm
gonna,
not saying specifically this.
that's gonna
proposal,
spill
but-
into our next item.
Okay.
If you indulge me, we're gonna be able to answer
Alright,
that
fair
in the
enough.
next item, next agenda item.
Fair enough.
Anything from John and Carl? Okay. We got the 5H, committees and work groups. Following our board retreat that we had, one of the samples that was given to us was our board subcommittee breakdown is kind of archaic. And champion Mr. Cabanero's cause over here, he's been saying that we need to look in more radical ways to look at education in Torrington, instead of us just saying because we've had these subcommittees and this set up for 75 years, we have to continue to set up. A thought that we were pushing around was to go to a more work group instead of standing committees. Because what Paul suggested be radical, I'm going to pick his subcommittee just as an example. You take school improvement, every topic we get that we really kind of don't know where to stuff, we sort of shove into school improvement. Because we don't really have a subcommittee to handle a specific topic. The thought process that we were running with was if we developed a work group of 2 or 3 members, 1 member, if that's all we had interested in it, that member would basically take that thought, be given a time, pick the selected administrative staff that they need to make this happen, and if it was, use Vinnie's group, that he's working on the wellness committee. He's working with the insurance carrier, he's working with Sue, he's working with Cheryl, he's working, and when they develop what the wellness program should be, they'll take that wellness program idea to policy and see how it blends into the policies. Then they'll take it to budget and see how it blends into budget. And then when it, prior to their completion date, they would bring it to the board and give us the presentation on the board so that we're getting a complete, it's been vetted through all the different subcommittees. We don't have to say, how's that going to impact this? We'd already know. And an idea would be exactly as Mr. Cavanero and Mr. Nardi were saying, if you took, how do we advance online learning? How do we get that into an AP or more broad in the enrichment instead of course catch-up mode? That could be a work group. 2 guys, 2 members, 2 guys, ladies get together. That's their group. They talk. You'd have to work with the online provider. I don't really know, and I'm not sure if Sue knows, what the online provider would need to make that an AP course. It might entail contacting UConn. It might entail, but the board member could work with either the assistant superintendent or the superintendent or the business manager on whoever is more tied to that topic and develop that topic, run with it, and it would be not really tied to a set meeting schedule. You'd be able to do it more on your time and go and see what we can put together and then bring it to policy, bring it to budget, then vet it in front of the whole board and make us a little more productive than saying that's still in personnel, that's still in school improvement, that's still in policy. Because things get bogged down because we can't get a quorum, we can't hold a meeting. This way someone used Dan on the technology subcommittee when he was working with the computers, and it gives somebody, he's got the knowledge, and when he starts talking, I'm going to pick on you, Dan, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
9 out of 10 times when he gets going off on the bandwidth, I don't have any concept of what he's talking about. I know he's talking about bandwidth, but when he starts talking about the specific numbers of a particular, I'm gone. I mean, I can follow it up to a point, but then my expertise in that just tails off. So he could run with something like that. So in projecting that forward, we were looking at, we have to keep the policy committee and the budget committee. Grievance committee we left intact. Taking personnel and using the heads of each negotiation committee, that if there's a personnel issue that comes up, you go to use the TDA or use the 1579 group or the administrators group, the non-certified administrators. They can go to that chair of that committee that was responsible for negotiating that contract, knows the ins and outs of it, and work through it instead of having a set meeting, having sat through a lot of personnel meetings in the past couple of years when I was on personnel, sometimes they're 10 minutes long, sometimes they're 3.5 minutes long, sometimes they take 2.5 hours. You know, it was a real, dependent on what the topic was. We didn't need to meet all the time. And basically, instead of doing school improvement and personnel, doing subcommittee groups to focus on wellness, to focus on whatever the topic is, online learning in this particular case, technology of the broadcast, in your case, Paul, and being able to enhance these individual topics that are a specialty to each. We also deleted the liaison assignments, so we had to fit Carl into the mix because he came to replace Dave. Not sure who wants what liaison assignment. They're kind of, if you're happy with the one you have, you can stay with the one you have. If somebody wants to move, now's the time to move because we have openings. Any discussion on